everybody. Earl at thelogbook.com, back for more Voyages of Shelf-Discovery. We're going back to the 90s, baby. There is nothing to open with these guys because these guys have been out of the package for a very, very long time. This is the first wave of Babylon 5 action figures, released by Diamond Select around 1997, as I recall. And the first wave was only 4 figures. They're all 6 inches. They're in that scale. And they're very basic as far as articulation goes. These guys, I mean, we're talking like Kenner basic on articulation. And that's assuming they have that much. You see Londo, second guy from the left there with the big hair. He has this long coat, and rather than taking that into account in the sculpt as far as allowing for leg movement, his legs simply don't move. He is always standing in that particular pose. Now, the good thing is, it's a good sturdy pose for standing, so there's no doubt that the figure will stand. But Delenn there, with the dress, again, very, almost a statue. The hair affords her very little head motion. Her arms move. Okay? Let's just put it that way. Delenn's arms move. Sheridan and Jakar at the far ends of the screen. Okay, these are more like the amount of articulation you would have from your classic Kenner Star Wars figures. Their heads rotate, their shoulders rotate, their legs rotate. And other than that, that's them. There were accessories were not included with these figures. Now, each figure did include a ship that was representative of their species spacecraft in the show. So Jakar came with a Narn ship. Londo came with a Centauri ship. A Centauri shuttle, if I remember correctly. Delenn came with the very fish-shaped Minbari ship. Sheridan came with the Babylon 5 space station. And the thing is, at the same time, you had micro machines out for Babylon 5. And those were more detailed than the ships, the larger ships that came with these figures. On average, the micro machines were smaller but more detailed. And they had stands. So, and at the same time, here's the thing. This show had an absolutely rabid following. The people who stuck with it were rewarded for doing so. Let me put it that way. And so, those of us who were fans at the time, while the show was on the air, before it was this past tense thing that was talked about in glowing terms of being, monumentally groundbreaking television, that you hear all of that now. At the time, it was an uphill push to get people to watch this. Now, I remember this because I worked at 2 TV stations in a row that had Babylon 5 as part of their programming. And there was, at the time, kind of this weird rivalry between Babylon 5 and the Star Trek franchise, which at the time Babylon 5 was on the air. You still had Next Gen on during that first part of the first season. And then once you got into 1995, you were up against both Deep Space Nine and Voyager. Of course, Deep Space Nine was a Star Trek show, also set on a space station, so that's where the real rivalry was. And if you have read the autobiography of Babylon 5 creator J. Michael Straczynski, he's got the receipts to show for the fact that Paramount had seen the Babylon 5 concept, and then, along comes Deep Space Nine. Well, we can't let this other syndication package have a space station show to themselves, can we? We may never know what is up with that. But the fans were starving for any merch, and so you got the first soundtrack CD in '95, practically 2 seasons into the run of the show. You got a second CD in '97, I believe, and then the floodgates opening. You started getting CDs with soundtracks to individual episodes. There was an official magazine that was a fantastic resource of information and interviews. You had, of course, you had Joe Straczynski himself on Genie and CompuServe, and then AOL and Usenet. All these things where people gathered in the days before the social internet as we now know it, where he was giving you insider info on how the sausage got made. And that was all fascinating. Sometimes it ventured dangerously close to being, I am giving you information that did not make it into the script, and you should keep this in mind when you watch the show. I have very specific feelings about that. No, if it's critical to understanding the plot, put it in the damn show. Don't make it bonus feature stuff that you only get interacting with the producer online. But that's neither here nor there, and that's not exactly a situation that has changed over the years. If anything, that's gotten worse. Joe was actually reasonably good about not doing that to us most of the time. There were really, you had tie-in novels. There was a making-of book. There's almost no merch now. The sad thing is, Eagle Moss, in its waning days, tried to inquire with Warner Brothers about doing spaceship models for Babylon 5 comparable to what Eagle Moss had also been doing for Star Trek. No dice. Warner Brothers wasn't interested. So, not only did Babylon 5 have competition from outside, there were people within its own studio who were not fond of it. And it literally took one of those executives retiring and dying, in that order, to... or I may be wrong about that. One of those executives at Warner Brothers who disliked Babylon 5 literally had to shuffle off this mortal coil for there to be any new movement with the show. And that's a very recent development. That we're not talking the 90s. We're talking we're talking the 2010s. So make of that what you will. This show has always had an uphill climb. So even a meager 4-figure wave starting this collection, and 2 of the figures were basically statues, we were happy to have them. Those of us who were, the OG fandom, boy, we were so elated to have these. There was one variant in this first wave, and that is Delenn prior to her transformation. So this is season 1 Delenn, basically. And you see she's got the Minbari shuttle with her. That was her pack-in. I have never had the nerve to take this figure out of the packaging. And so my season 1 Delenn, she is forever on her card. Basically a repaint of the figure that we got. Season 1 Delenn was more into golds and metallic stuff. So it's the same outfit, it's the same sculpt. She barely has any articulation, although her head, I imagine, does rotate better without the hair. But I've never taken the figure off the card to verify that. I just can't bring myself to. The funny thing is, Babylon 5 is more than 30 years old now. These figures, ironically, constitute monumental spoilers. Jakar's figure has one blue eye and one red eye. That is a development that does not come along until season 4. Season 4, yeah. Londo is pretty much the only spoiler-free figure there. Delenn as you see her from season 2 onward. I'm not going to specify the reason for the change. Captain Sheridan is not in that uniform for the whole series. I'm going to be very vague about that. The action figures are kind of monumental spoilers, so if you are a baby Babylon 5 fan and you're just getting into the show and you're like, "Oh, neat, merch." Be aware that even the merch may spoil critical developments in the show. I am firmly of the opinion that Babylon 5 very much like shall we say, Blake 7. Babylon 5 should be watched absolutely cold. It really should be, because even though it's more than 30 years old, you should be able to experience the surprise of it and enjoy that in much the same way that we did, to be quite honest. You should be able to enjoy it without it being spoiled, and you should be able to get that feeling of, holy cow, this show is going off the rails, absolutely off the rails, that all of us had back in the day. So I am a firm believer in doing things that way, in maintaining the surprise. So even in discussing the fact that there are spoilers involved, even telling you that, I am trying to be very vague about telling you what exactly is spoiled. So it's it's an interesting thing to even try to talk about, because I firmly believe that there are some shows, no matter how old they might be, you do want to maintain the surprise for future generations getting to experience it for the first time. And Babylon 5 is definitely one of those. So if I have been maddeningly vague in conveying any of this information to you, that's why. That's why. So go watch some Babylon 5, then worry about picking up the merch, because trust me, you will be like us. You will feel like, okay, yes, this is a show worth celebrating with whatever goodies I can get my hands on. Which, trust me, wasn't much.